Is Emanuele Viterbo. He is a professor at Monash University in Australia, and he's going to speak about lattice index coding.
Emanuele. Thank you, Brian, for this opportunity to give this talk. And I think by pure chance, this talk is related to both of the projects, as you will see. Okay. So this is joint work with Lattice as a postdoc, and me home at Monash University. So let me first quickly review what is index coding. So index coding is a technique to distribute efficiently a set of messages from a server to various users. Now, the special thing is that the users may have already part of these messages, and they want some other messages that they still need. So the objective is that given that these users already have something, the server can transmit a packet, a coded packet, that satisfies the needs of all the users with, and the objective is to do it in the most efficient way. For example, the shortest possible packet. So the general assumption for index coding, you see I made a wired thing, is channel is noise-free. So we are assuming no errors occur. So this is the original setting for index coding. Now, index coding at the physical layer is essentially the same thing, but the server this time is a wireless server, and the terminals are mobile or wireless terminals. Receiver, they involve different SNRs, and of course they also have different demands and different prior knowledge of the messages. Oh yeah. Thank you. So I will speak not as loud. Thank you. So where does this this situation naturally occur? Well, in broadcast phase of the decode and forward, or in a retransmission in a broadcast channel, or in wireless network coding. So even the multi-way relay situation, you have each user already knows the message that is sending in the multiple access phase, and then in the broadcast phase, you can use this index coding at the physical layer and take advantage of the fact that the user already knows something, what he transmits. So the objective, again, is to maximize achievable rates, that is the rates for each of the users, or minimize the SNR requirements. So the extra step parameter we are playing with now is SNR. Okay. So what is known about capacity of the index coding. So some special cases we have when the number of receivers is just 2. So when the private messages for 3 receivers is known, and when every receiver demands all the messages. So remember that we didn't require, you see the receiver, this receiver knows some messages and wants some other, not necessarily all the messages. So there may be less requirements. But the special case where every receiver wants all the messages, then in this case we have some result on the capacity. So when in this talk we will in fact study this case where the known messages, the set of known messages and union the set of unknown messages is the whole set, k messages. So let's look at it in these terms. Just review the result on the capacity of this case. We have k messages transmitted from the source, this broadcasting station. And we have multiple receivers at, let's say, our generic receiver has a given SNR and a given index set of messages that he already knows. So S is the known messages. That means he knows the xk components of the transmitted messages. And we define the rate of each message, so the R1 to RK, these can be different rates. The total transmitted rate is just the sum of these. So from here, total rates are being broadcast to multiple receivers. The difference is that the multiple receivers all have different prior knowledge. So this theorem is quite intuitive. By Tunzel, was given in 2006, tells us that the achievable rate region is this rate point in the rate region is achievable if and only if for every receiver with a given SNR and a given S, we have this. This is essentially obvious. This is the rate of the information you don't know. So this must be less than the capacity of the link from the transmitter to the given receiver. So that's simple. So what does it mean in terms of error probability? Let's see it from this point of view. So if it means that if the receiver has no side information, it means it's receiving the entire rate R, which was transmitted, and since it has no prior information, the minimum SNR where you can achieve a reliable communication is 2 to the power of 2R approximately. So this is like the minimum SNR you can have when you have no side information. When you have some side information, given the previous slide, your SNR goes down by to this value, 2 to the 2R minus RS. So that's the gap you will have in a gain of error probability whenever you know some information. So the more you know, the bigger this gap is. And you can see it's proportional to 6 times RS, the rate in dB. So we can translate this into this expression. We say that for every bit per dimension of side information that the receiver already has, there will be a 6 dB coding gain. Okay? Thanks to that. This is in the ideal case. So what does it mean? It means that the minimum squared Euclidean distance must improve in your code as you know more and more information. And it really gives us a guideline to design a good index code. So essentially we need 2 things. We need the code to be good when the receiver knows nothing, no prior knowledge. So if your receiver doesn't know anything, you just need a good code for an AWGN channel. And then we need an efficient way to convert the side information into a Euclidean distance gain in our code. So I'll show you a bit of this after I go through the prior work in this direction. So we had some index code with the same error correction capability at all receivers, and this was based in the binary case. More results on the error correction capability, still with binary codes. So in this case, we are looking at the Gaussian broadcast channel. So all the previous work was on binary channels with errors as well. So that's the new part is working on the Gaussian broadcast channel. Okay, so let's look how the index coding for the Gaussian broadcast channel works here. We have alphabet for each, an alphabet capital X for each message, and these are they have each message has a rate 1 over n log 2 of cardinality of the alphabet. This n is the dimension of in which the code lies, the Euclidean space, in the Euclidean space, and we will see it's going to be a lattice code. And then the receiver works like this. Well, there is the additive noise, and the decoder takes the channel measurement and feeds to the decoder the prior knowledge, and spits out all the messages that already knows and or doesn't know yet. So let me show you the picture of what we want from the code we are designing. So this encoder is taking all the messages, packing them up somehow, I will show you how, into one code word in this code X, which is going to be a discrete subset of Rn. So now imagine your code, your index code is this pile of points in the Euclidean space, and we know that its performance of a Euclidean space code asymptotically depends on the minimum Euclidean distance, and let's say this is d0, the minimum distance between any of these 2 points, d0. Now what happens if I receive one of these points, but I know that some components of these points are fixed because I already know them? Well, it means that, let's say, I can choose among these code words the ones that have that value that I already know. I call it, for example, here A1. I know the first message, so I know all the components relative to the first message. And that means I can throw away, expurgate the points which are not satisfying this condition. So essentially here I have a subcode of this one. Now, if we are doing things well, this subcode will be, of course it's more sparse, but what we really want is that the minimum distance between any 2 points in this subcode to be larger than it was before. Now, obviously, depending on the value of that you already know, what's the value of the message that you already know, you may have different subcodes, and in total you will have 2 power n times Rs different subcodes. So we want to look at the worst case of this, and we'll call this the minimum distance when you know an arbitrary subset of messages in S. So we minimize over all the minimum distances of all these subcodes. So we want this ds to be as large as possible. So what does it mean that when we go from here to here, well, we possibly have increased our minimum distance from d0 to ds, and then we can say that we have an asymptotic coding gain in the error probability, which is proportional to basically ds squared over d0 squared, 10 log 10 in dB. So that's the asymptotic coding gain you would have when you know the messages in location S, in the set index location X. So we then normalize this relative to per bit of information we know already. So we just define this as the normalized gain per bit of side information. So we measure that in dB per bit per dimension. Okay, so obviously this when you change, you want this depends on this subset S. So, and this subset S can be any subset of the integer set from 1 to k. So we want this to work well, actually to have, we want this distance ds to increase the more side information we have. So this is a natural now definition of how to measure this improvement. So we'll call this the side information gain. So it tells us that an index code which has some encoder rho and code x has a side information gain. Well, this was the coding, normalized coding gain per bit per dB per bit per dimension. But then we want to see the worst case. Now, since we can have receivers which have any subset, a prior knowledge which is any subset of the indices from 1 to k, except the trivial one, know nothing, or know everything, so that's why there are two little dashes there. So we remove the trivial cases, and this number summarizes the behavior of your index code in the most general case. So the worst case behavior of your index code. So we know that the side information of rate Rs will bring approximately an SNR gain of at least this gamma times Rs dB. Okay, so that's the idea. If we want to predict how many dB I gain from the prior knowledge, I can use this side information gain number. And then a good index code will have, of course, it has to be good for the case pure Gaussian channel case where there is no prior knowledge, so with a large D0, and then I want a large side information gain. So in that way, I maximize the gain from the side information. Okay. So here is an example of simple index code, and then I'll give you another one later. But this is to give you an idea why we can achieve that picture with the circle of the points in the circle in a very simple case. So assume your index code, capital X calligraphic, is 16 QAM, and you're encoding two messages into these 16 points. So we will use the case where when you know, let's now assume so the labeling of the points corresponds to the index code encoder. So I won't go show you the labels there. You cannot read them probably from that far, but it's a labeling of the 16 QAM points in a way that the requirement of the index code design are met. So let's see how this labeling works. Now imagine the receiver, okay, let's start from easy case. The receiver doesn't know anything. So if the receiver doesn't know anything, it will just decode a 16 QAM. So it will have performance of a 16 QAM. Now let's take a receiver which knows the first message. So it knows one of the two messages, the first one in particular. Now, if this receiver knows that first message, it means it knows its value is 0 here. So if we know x1 is 0, well then you can go into the labels and you will find that the 4 points which have a 0 in the first component are these red ones. So this is a subset. You see, it's a subset of the 16 QAM. And the good news is that the minimum distance has doubled. So we have doubled the minimum distance from here to here with respect to the minimum distance we had in the 16 QAM. And whatever value you know already for message 1, you see it's still the same shape. You will always get minimum distance 2, which is double of the D0. Similarly, if you have a receiver which knows the second message, you can find these other cases, and the second message can be 0, 1, 2, or 3. You will find that these are effectively what the subcodes which are decoded by the receiver, which has this prior knowledge. So this is a very simple case where we effectively have the 6 dB per bit per dimension because we doubled the minimum distance by knowing one of the two messages. Okay. So yeah, here is a picture of the performance. Well, this is the performance of a 16 QAM, and then this is the performance of one of those red dot constellations when you know either 1 or 2 if they were symmetric. So you get this, the measured gap is 6.5 dB, which is greater than this gamma times RS, which was predicted by our side information gain parameter. Okay. And the reason is that it's here, these 2 points are at minimum distance, but then these 2 points are even further. So it's doing a little better than the 6 dB. Okay, now I want to show you, let's say, a familiar labeling of a 16 QAM, which is not a good index code. Just to show you what made that good index code. So if you take the famous 16 QAM set partitioning labeling, there you could think of having a labeling with 4 bits per point. So you could think of these as 4 messages, or 4 binary messages. And then we label the 16 points with 4 bits. And this is the labeling you get by doing set partitioning, which was the right thing to do with coded modulation. But I will show you that if it doesn't work for index coding, because there are some special cases, when you know the side information indices where you don't get any gain. And this is the case where it doesn't work. If you know the messages 2, 3, and 4, so let's say you know the last 3 bits, and you know they're all 0, you see 3 zeros here and 3 zeros there, then you find that your subcode is just given by these 2 red dots. And that's bad news because the minimum distance has stayed the same. So we didn't have the index coding gain for one specific choice of S. And index coding must work for any choice of S. And in fact, the set partitioning was specifically designed for the situation where you know your prior knowledge is of this type. You know either message 1, or you know message 1 and 2, or 1, 2, and 3, and so on. So it's not designed to work for any subset, as index coding should do. So I'll give you now a toy example of index code before which is kind of the way to then think of the lattice case. If we are okay. So let's say this encoder where we have 3 messages. One is a binary, one is a ternary, and one is binary message alphabet. And we will build an index code which uses 30 letter alphabet at the output as an index code alphabet. And the encoding function, which takes these 3 messages and builds the point in the code word in the index code, is simply this. Okay, it's an integer linear combination with these special numbers, and we take that modulo 30. So these are 0, 1, 0, 1, 2, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 times this, add it all up, modulo 30. Now, what's special about these numbers? Well, they come from the Chinese reminder theorem, and guarantee with these numbers, you are guaranteed that this function is bijective. That means for any triplet of x1, x2, x3, you get a unique point in here. That's crucial, okay, to have this bijection. And that's guaranteed by the Chinese remainder theorem, which tells you basically how to find these coefficients. So this is a simple case where we are working with one-dimensional constellation, and I will show you a picture of this lattice. And that will be the only lattice picture you will see really, because it's one-dimensional and it's easy. So here is the code that the index code that's being transmitted. You are sending one of these 30 points from 0 to 29 labeled. Now let's look at, for example, you have here 6 cases, and they correspond to all the possible subsets of known messages. So you can know message 1. So if you know message 1, you see that this is going to be fixed. So this is just a constant, and I don't care what it is. And the corresponding expurgated code, now it's only 15 points, but the minimum distance is double. Here the distance was 1, now it's 2. If you are more lucky and you know message 2, it seems better because now this constant is still constant and the points are separated by 3. But you shouldn't be thinking too much that you are so lucky, because in fact knowing message 2 means you know more bits, you know more information. Remember, message 2 was a ternary alphabet. So it has more bits of information. So you have more knowledge when you know message 2. And again, if you know message 3, that was 5-letter alphabet, so you know even more, and here the distance has increased. If you know 2 messages, again, you can know 1 and 2, more and more and more. The distance increases the more amount, the larger amount of information you know. Now, the nice feature of this toy example, and then that we generalize, is that you can exactly predict what's going to be the minimum distance of the subcode for any pattern of S, and for a given, which has a given rate. So you see, it depends, it exponentially depends on the rate of the side information you already know. So when you put all these together, so you have, you can see that you know the minimum distance of any expurgated code you may have. You can plug it in and you'll find that you get 6 dB per bit per dimension, which is really the good news, because it's the asymptotic coding gain when you know this side information gives you that prediction. And here is the picture, the error probability curve. When you know nothing, the blue. When you know message 1, you go to green. When you know message 1 and 2, you go to red. And you can see, if you look at the gaps, the asymptotic coding gain, well, it's exactly 6 dB here. And then from blue to red, you get 15.6 dB. And the predicted side information gain was very close. So now maybe I can skip a bit of this, because it's just, I want to, that was the toy example. Maybe some of you may want to stop their brain at this point, because it's enough. But for those who can keep going with the lattices, you can, that was a one-dimensional lattice, and now we can play with higher dimensional lattices where things are more fun. So I'll just review a few definitions. Well, I don't think we've seen this definition today yet. So
Please give us the definition.
So why not? So a lattice lambda is generated by a matrix G multiplied by a vector, an n-dimensional vector of integers. So you get a discrete subgroup of Rn, Euclidean. So you get essentially a very regular structure of points in space. And the key parameter is the minimum distance of the lattice. We call it d min of lambda. And it's the shortest distance, Euclidean distance, between any 2 lattice points. We define the Voronoi region of a lattice point as the set of points which is closest to the origin than to any other lattice point. And you can think of this, essentially lattice codes is a finite subset of a lattice. And there are various ways of constructing lattice codes. And one way is through the modulo lambda operation. And what is modulo lambda? Well, it's essentially you taking any point x in space and copying it inside the Voronoi region around the origin. So if you had a point there, you would quantize it to this point, and then you subtract that from x, and you go back here, and it brings you here. Okay, so this is the game. Now, why do we use this modulo lattice operation? Well, we use it to define some lattice codes as quotients of a lattice by a sublattice. And essentially the result of this is that you can select a finite number of points inside the Voronoi region of the sublattice. So your lattice is the set of all these points, and the sublattice is the set of purple points. It's sublattice. And the Voronoi region of this sublattice is luckily a square but rotated, and then the corresponding lattice code is the set of these points 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, so these are obtained, you see, as the infinite lattice intersect the Voronoi region of the sublattice. Now, the good thing of constructing a lattice code in this way is that we preserve a group structure. And lambda s is called the shaping lattice. So one way to achieve shaping gain is to choose the sublattice to be to have an almost spherical Voronoi region. Okay? But we don't talk about this here. Now I just want to show you the lattice index code construction. And the idea is the following. We start from a family of lattices which have all got a common sublattice. So they share the same sublattice that we will use as the shaping sublattice. That means these are all distinct lattices, but they have a common sublattice. So what does it mean here? I can just pictorially draw that. I will have a lattice code for message 1, a lattice code for message 2, and so on, which are all different lattices. But then I just add them, okay? I add them modulo the lambda s. So I'm going to build a fine lattice, which will be my index code lattice. Now, this doesn't work for free and doesn't work always, but it works when you choose these properties, as we did in the one-dimensional case with using the Chinese reminder theorem. Okay, and it only works essentially when your encoder is bijective, and so it's not guaranteed that this sum of points will give you that bijection in general. Okay, so just the definition of a lattice index code is just a set of nested, is built by a set of nested lattice codes, such that the encoding back, which adds all the points, modulo lambda s, is 1 to 1. Okay? Now this is just a definition, then you need to find one. And the key is this unique decodability, or 1-to-1 mapping. So there is one thing you can say is that the rate of the kth message can be written, since it's the kth message is encoded as a lattice code with the kth lattice lambda k. You can count the number of points as ratio of the Voronoi cell of the shaping lattice, of the volume of the Voronoi cell of the shaping lattice, divided by the volume of the Voronoi cell of the kth lattice. So that will tell you the number of points. In there, you take log 2 and divide by n, you have the rate in bits per dimension. Now, when no side information, you have the lattice lambda, the fine lattice, minimum distance. When you have prior side information in the index set S, you will be looking at the lattice, which is the sum of the lattices, the sublattices lambda k, only where you don't know the messages. Now, the nice thing is that if you take a dense lattice in Rn, then you can upper bound the side information gain with this 6 dB per bit per dimension. And then the game will be to design lattice index codes which get this upper bound, achieve this upper bound. So maybe I'll go a bit faster at this stage because I'm set to achieve that property. I'm going to use the Chinese reminder theorem, and I'll show you how this works on the toy example, how it explains the toy example, and then it will work for arbitrary lattices with some stretch of imagination. You can see it. So essentially, if we start with k distinct primes, then we build this m, which is the product of all of the k primes, and then we compute the mk as m over the pk. So we just remove one prime from that product. Now the Chinese reminder theorem tells us that there is an isomorphism between the k tuple of integers mod p1, p2, p3, pk, and the integers mod m. So you can see here, a vector of k messages is mapped to a number. You can think of it as a label for this vector. It's a nice way of labeling vectors. Now the good news is that the subcode generated by the unknown messages, so when you know something, you just freeze those values you know, and you go for the sublattice, and that's given by adding only the terms that you don't know. And that's what you have to decode. But the nice thing is that we know what this sublattice is given by the greatest common divisors of this mk that you don't know. Now, this is for one dimension. In an n-dimensional lattice, we just use these numbers as scaling factors of a base lattice. So we start from a good lattice lambda. We take the primes p. We compute the m1 to mk coefficients, and then these are just scaled versions by integers of this lambda lattice. So they are sublattices of this, and then they all share a common sublattice, which is m times lambda, okay? Because they are all nested in this way. Now, the nice thing that happens is that, well, you know the rate of each of these sublattices. Okay. And the good thing is that you also know the minimum distance. Okay? It's directly connected to the rate. Now, given this property, we can say that the lattices constructed in this way actually get the 6 dB per bit per dimension side information gain, which is the best possible. Okay, so as long as we start with a good lattice for the no side information case. So then we extended this to some other lattices where we use complex and or Eisenstein lattices, and also quaternion lattices. And now, why we did this? Because you may see that the limitation of this is that the messages that we can encode all should have rates given by log 2 of some prime p. Okay, so and they have to be all different. So we don't have much flexibility in the choice of the rates, and the good thing is that going into these complex and Eisenstein and even the quaternion lattices, we can have some messages of the same rate. Now, the problem remains how to generate more encapables of rates that you want to use. And so I wanted to say that the construction using Chinese reminder theorem was originally proposed for network coding by Krishna and Juan, and the other construction for norm Euclidean lattices are also available. So this is Z of I, this is Z of omega, but there are a few other constructions, lattices that can be built in this way, and that would apply. And then the very recent result from ISIT last week from Juan, that by using lattice constructed by from algebraic rings of algebraic integers, he could achieve n-tuples of messages with all the same rate for any number k. So that's through these algebraic integer rings. So if you want, these were special cases, but this gives you that extra flexibility, and especially you can have all the equal rate k-tuple. So that means I will not explain the part 2 because, but the part 2 is you have the slides. Then the part 2 is basically a concatenated scheme where we use the inner code as a modulation, and then we can do outer code, and that gives us very good performance in terms of even getting close to, I'll show you, some performance with a simulation of the concatenated schemes. You can get pretty close to capacity, not very close, but this was a convolutional code with relatively short length, and that's what we showed, but in ISIT. So just conclude, the index codes we've seen index code for additive wide Gaussian noise broadcast channel, and index code in the special case where the receiver want to receive all the messages and has some. We define the side information gain to characterize the quality of a code, of an index code. We gave some lattice index code construction which achieves the 6 dB, which is the maximum achievable gain, and uses Chinese remainder theorem and other constructions that are available. We then, in part 2, we did the coded index modulation, and this converts the problem of index coding for the Gaussian broadcast channel essentially into a coding for a multiple access channel. And then what we did is index modulation plus channel codes for the multiple access channel, and that was the performance you'll see. So these are a few references for further reading. So this is the full paper submitted. You can find it on archive. We have the presented one in ITW, one in the coded version is in ISIT, and here in this letter we actually constructed by computer search index codes for QAM modulations, which make them pretty useful because they are like, you can see they are a labeling of a QAM constellation, specially designed for index coding purposes. So you can find there basically a table of up to size 256 QAM and number of messages up to 5 by exhaustive. Thank you.
Great. Great, thank you very much, Emanuele. I'm going to keep practicing his name. So I've known him for a few years, and I was always saying his name the wrong way. And at last night's dinner, I discovered that I had been saying it the wrong way all this time. So now I'm practicing the correct way. So I'm sorry I had to cut you off a little bit, but we had started late. But I think we ought to have a little bit of question and discussion, even though we're a little bit late. So any questions for Emanuele?
Yeah, you pointed out that the Ungerberg set partitioning is not a very good code. And then you are just also pointing out here the last publication, which also where you show optimized labeling. It somehow remembers me to the search for optimized labels for the bit interleaved coded modulation, where basically exactly the same you try to do. You fix somehow one bit or one label, and then you try to maximize the information exchange with respect to the others. Did you compare now, for example, your newly found labelings with respect to this exit chart analysis?
No, but it would be a good thing to try, because they may be more useful, because the minimum distance, when you're doing bit interleaving, it could be very useful to have this more random, the good bits and the bad bits not necessarily are in the right sequence. Yeah. So that's why, great, but I think BICM's optimal labeling is the gray labeling. I think that was the best possible, but I'm not sure how this would go.
Not gray.
It should not necessarily be gray. It depends on what kind of code you are using.
Okay, it depends on the code then.
So even anti-gray was much better for 8 PSK and for 16 QAM. One should compare your lattice code now here for this 16 QAM with the 16 QAM optimized for bit interleaved coded modulation, and could be somehow similar. I don't know right now.
Yeah.
I doubt it will be similar, because it requires two levels of side information to work, right? If you know the one level, the second has to be good. But if you know the second, the first has to be good as well.
Yeah. So it's two-way, yes. When this, it's in this way.
It's beautiful, actually. This one.
It's kind. I think it's a new labeling which gives you that. But another, maybe I say this as you can think of this as a superposition coding, but highly structured. Because you can add many of these. You can think of these layers, the alphabet. You are adding up, but in a good way. That when whichever you know already, then that helps you.
Yeah, but I see your point now. I think if you do BAC, maybe.
Because here you could now message 1 is fixed, either to 1 or to 2, or message 2 could be fixed, either 1 or 2. If you have, for example, the same dimension for the messages, and then you have a highly symmetric question, which is then also for bit interleaved coded modulation, because you don't know which bit is good, which bit is bad.
Which bit is good and which bit is bad. So another, I think, open question is to look how to use this structure for decoding, because if we have nested lattice, that's what to do. You have to go from bottom up. Here, maybe you can benefit from decoding different ways. So maybe that's why your BICM could be good on here.
So my question is also related to Dirk's comment. Is that maybe this is optimal for one snapshot observation-based decoding and detection. But then if you think about feedback like this, and then optimality should be different, because there is the issue of the exit chart matching.
What you see here is that I convert side information into better performance. So it tells you that the more you know, the more likely you will get the missing part. So you are desperate to complete your job, and this would be good. But maybe you could also use it, try to design other schemes where you try to reduce the packet length. So You could reduce dimensionality of your. So there are different things you can gain. But I don't think it will work like this here.
But I mean, is the finishing time so strict?
No.
Not today, but tomorrow very soon.
Oh, tomorrow.
Yeah. I'm happy to answer more questions. Yep.
Say that the gain of 60 dB,
Yes.
yeah, the gain of
Per
60
bit per
dB,
dimension.
it is always achievable even though you have only one set information or one the message unit.
Yes. In the toy example I showed you, which is the easiest way to see, you gain. Let's say message one. Message one was 0 or 1, so it was 1 bit of information on message one. The minimum distance doubles. Here, if message 2 there were 3 alphabet letters in message 2, so like 1.5 bits of information. Well, it's log 2 of 3 bits of information. And then your minimum distance goes from 1 to 3, and it's exactly, you see, 2 to the log of 2 of it. And it's just magic here that happened. Yeah. So it's optimal construction. So I think it should have other application. Even pure information theory, superposition coding, you may have to look at it in these terms. When you have this, you want this symmetry of different messages. You symmetrize the problem. I don't know. There may be more things to think about in this side.
If you allow me.
Yeah.
Only if you use the mic.
Okay. Thank you. The file now I'm looking at on my computer notebook is the system of coding over broadcast channels in 2006.
Yeah.
I see some similarity to the index coding and this paper. And this paper doesn't say how we can get the side information, but your technique provides us with some technique by which we can get optimal side information. So that way, what I understand is correct.
Okay.
No. I'm asking you a question because I'm just thinking of these kind of things. So my understanding is correct or not?
I better read that paper first. If you can email it to me, I will tell you tomorrow, maybe, or later. But definitely, you can. This is index coding, but you can still think of this as a multiple access code. You just Mac. The messages come from different users. They add up with these weights, and these are like the weights. And it's different, if you want to do superposition modulation, like normally with 2 messages you can put 2 times x1 plus x2, and you get, from a BPSK you get a 4 PAM. So then you can do superposition or modulation. But here the coefficients are different, that's all. That's the only difference in those terms. And they have the better use of the side information.
Okay.
So I think the result you shown is very nice. And I was wondering if there's a converse part of the...
I think that's for you to answer. So what do you mean by converse?
Yeah, so you have defined a class of index lattices.
Yes.
And not only the code constructed based upon the Chinese reminders there, so we can also construct any type of construction. Can you get better?
I think the limit here is that you can only achieve some points in the rate region, because it's limited by for the prime numbers. So those are the limit. You don't have any point. But maybe with the outer coding, then you can, when in the concatenated scheme, then you can use you can get other rate points.
Concatenate.
Yeah, if you concatenate, because the general concatenated scheme, you have your index code here, and then each message is channel coded. So you can play with the rates here of this channel code.
I was just asking about the single lattice index code.
I don't know that. No, I don't know.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Did you want to ask another question? I was going to say, at this point, we're exactly 15 minutes behind schedule.
Oh,
And so maybe if we continue with the program.